The night was unusually silent, the kind of silence that makes even the faintest sound feel amplified. In the corner of a sprawling multi-million-dollar mansion, a single desk lamp flickered, throwing a halo of light onto an open textbook. There, hunched over pages filled with notes, was the cleaner. Not just any cleaner, but a young black woman whose presence in this home was meant to be invisible. Her name was Maya. She didn't know it yet, but the choices she was making tonight would ripple far beyond this room. Most people, if they walked in, would only see her uniform, her hands covered in the invisible residue of labor. They would never suspect the hours she spent studying after the world thought she was asleep. And then he arrived. The billionaire homeowner, a man known for his sharp instincts and unforgiving standards, stepped softly into the room. His eyes caught the glow of the lamp first, then the pages, then the young woman, entirely engrossed in her work. For a moment, he simply observed, not out of suspicion, but out of curiosity. Here's what that moment teaches us. Power isn't always loud, sometimes it's hidden in plain sight, and intelligence, like a seed, can grow quietly in the dark, unnoticed, until someone decides to water it. She froze. She didn't know she had been seen. Her heart raced. Any rational thought might have screamed, hide, panic, apologize. But instead, she returned to her notes, pretending the moment didn't exist. A single action flipped the entire outcome, and he, the man who had everything, was the one holding his breath. He stepped closer, the sound of his shoes muffled by the thick carpet, and then he asked, calmly, a question that would change everything. "Why are you studying so late?" Maya looked up, her eyes wide. She didn't know it yet, but this question was the inciting spark that would illuminate a journey of resilience, strategy, and triumph, one that neither of them could have predicted. By the end of this night, what began as a quiet act of self-improvement in the shadows would confront assumptions, dismantle expectations, and challenge a system built to overlook people like her. And just like that, the quiet had become a stage for something extraordinary. Mini cliffhanger. Who is truly in control here? The billionaire with all the wealth, or the cleaner with all the ambition? Before Maya ever stepped into the billionaire's mansion, before she ever wore the uniform that signaled service, her life had been defined by limitations imposed by a system that often overlooked potential. She grew up in a neighborhood where dreams felt like luxuries, and every step forward required navigating a labyrinth of societal barriers. Her parents worked tirelessly, holding multiple jobs, sacrificing their own time and energy to give her a chance at something better. Yet, even with all that effort, the world outside her small apartment seemed designed to measure her worth by what she could produce in the moment, not by her intellect, her curiosity, or her determination. School was another battlefield. Maya learned early that attention wasn't enough. She had to fight for recognition, to prove that a black girl from a modest background could think beyond the limitations others tried to place on her. Teachers often missed her brilliance, or worse, dismissed it. Peers sometimes laughed at her aspirations, saying things like, "That's not for people like us." Each small dismissal left a mark, a quiet imprint of frustration, but also a deeper, almost imperceptible drive. Here's what that moment teaches us. Resilience is often born in the spaces where opportunity seems absent, and intelligence, when ignored, doesn't disappear. It waits, patiently, for a chance to assert itself. Maya's journey wasn't just about personal ambition. It was a response to systemic obstacles, educational inequity, economic disparities, and the daily microaggressions that whisper, "You are less than." Every late-night study session, every borrowed textbook, every small triumph over self-doubt was a rebellion against that narrative. By the time she became the cleaner in the billionaire's home, she had already internalized a crucial truth. Her worth was not measured by her uniform or her job title. The lamp that illuminated her notes tonight was more than a source of light. It was a symbol of her self-determination, the culmination of years spent learning, observing, and preparing for a moment like this. And yet, despite all her preparation, she had learned that society rarely offers recognition to those who labor in the background. The systems in place often obscure talent and reward visibility over substance. This reality shaped her strategy to excel quietly, to prepare relentlessly, and to wait for the moment when her capabilities could no longer be ignored. Mini cliffhanger. She didn't know it yet, but tonight, the hidden intelligence she had cultivated in silence was about to collide with a world that underestimated her, and that collision would ignite a series of events that neither she nor the billionaire could have foreseen. Maya sat frozen for a heartbeat, the billionaire's eyes quietly assessing her. The room seemed to contract around her. The hum of the lamp, the soft rustle of pages, even the faint tick of the wall clock became amplified. In that instant, a moral fork appeared before her, invisible yet unmistakable. One path beckoned toward fear. She could shrink into the role the world expected of her, the quiet, compliant employee, the invisible laborer whose ambition was irrelevant. She could apologize profusely, close her book and retreat to the shadows, keeping her dreams to herself. That path promised safety, predictability, and the avoidance of scrutiny, but it came at a cost, a quiet surrender of self. The other path demanded courage. It asked her to acknowledge her desire to learn, to embrace the intellect she had cultivated in the dark, and to risk judgment in front of someone who could have dismissed her, or worse, belittled her efforts. Choosing this path carried risk, the possibility of rejection, of misinterpretation, of exposing herself in a world that often punishes audacity from people who aren't expected to shine. Here's what that moment teaches us. The moral fork is rarely about right or wrong, it's about choosing alignment with your true potential, even when fear whispers for retreat. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she measured the room, the man, the quiet tension. He didn't need to ask again. He didn't need to press. He simply waited, silently, as if he already knew the answer might reveal far more than her words ever could. And then she made a choice, not with bravado, not with defiance, but with quiet confidence born of years of preparation. She looked up and said, calmly, because knowledge doesn't wait for convenience, I want to learn. The billionaire's expression shifted. A subtle, almost imperceptible change, but one that spoke volumes. She didn't know it yet, but her words had just set the first domino in motion. A single statement, a single alignment with her truth, had begun to rewrite the narrative. But here's the twist. The moral fork doesn't end with the choice. Every choice exposes you to consequences, tests you in unseen ways, and challenges your resolve. By standing in her truth, Maya had stepped into a new arena, one where intellect, resilience and moral clarity would be weighed against skepticism, bias, and the inertia of expectation. Mini cliffhanger, would her quiet courage be enough to survive the scrutiny of a world unprepared to recognize hidden brilliance, or would the forces aligned against her societal, systemic and personal, prove too powerful for a single act of truth to overcome? Maya's words hung in the air, but they were more than just an answer. They were the first visible sign of a hidden force that few had ever glimpsed. She didn't know it yet, but she possessed a kind of intelligence that thrived in silence, a brilliance cultivated in the shadows where the world expected her to fade. For years she had been studying more than textbooks. She had been observing human behavior, understanding patterns and power, and learning to anticipate what others overlooked. She knew how to manage perception, while quietly accumulating skill. Her intellect wasn't flashy, it wasn't about showing off. It was strategic, patient, and most importantly resilient. The billionaire noticed subtle cues that others missed. The careful organization of her notes, the way she cross-referenced ideas, even the precision in her handwriting. These small, almost imperceptible markers revealed a mind not just willing to learn, but capable of mastery. Here's what that moment teaches us. Brilliance often resides where no one is looking. It is cultivated quietly, away from the glare of recognition, until it's ready to assert itself. And when it does, the impact can be transformative. In that moment he realized something profound. Maya wasn't just a cleaner, she was a strategist in disguise, a mind trained to navigate complexity, a soul conditioned to thrive despite systemic barriers. He had seen diligence before, but he had never seen determination coupled with this kind of tactical intelligence. She didn't need to announce her capabilities, they revealed themselves naturally, like a river carving its path through rock, and just like that, the power dynamics in the room began to shift, though silently. For the first time Maya wasn't just responding to the world, she was preparing to shape it. But the world outside the mansion remained unyielding. Biases, skepticism, and systemic obstacles still awaited her. The hidden power she had nurtured would be tested, not by recognition alone, but by the adversity that sought to suppress it. Mini cliffhanger. She had the intelligence, she had the determination, but could these hidden strengths withstand the public trials and systemic challenges that loomed just beyond the walls of the mansion? The next morning, Maya returned to work as usual, but the world outside the mansion had not paused for her brilliance. Systems built to constrain her ambition were already pressing in. Subtle microaggressions from coworkers, skepticism from managers, and the ever-present weight of societal assumptions that told her, you belong only where we allow you to. It began with small slights. A supervisor questioned her efficiency, despite her meticulous attention to detail. A coworker mocked her late-night studies behind closed doors. Even clients who normally barely noticed her presence now seemed hyper-aware, ready to misinterpret her diligence as presumption. Every interaction reminded her, the world does not reward hidden excellence. Then came the public test. A major mistake, not hers, but attributed to her became the center of attention. Supplies went missing, an urgent task was mishandled, and the blame by default fell on Maya. She was humiliated, called out in front of others, and felt the sting of collective judgment. For a moment the hours of quiet preparation, the years of silent mastery seemed meaningless. Here's what that moment teaches us. Systemic obstacles are relentless. They test your resilience not just through challenges, but through public scrutiny, misattribution, and the quiet erosion of confidence. The world rarely gives a second chance to those it has already underestimated. Maya left the mansion that day, with her head held high, but her heart weighed down. She didn't cry. She rarely did, but a storm of frustration and doubt churned inside her. Why do I have to prove myself, over and over? She wondered. Why does the world reward visibility over substance? And yet, even in that moment of apparent defeat, something shifted. She realized that failure, while painful, was not a dead end. It was a mirror, reflecting the cracks in the system, and revealing the spaces where strategy, patience, and intelligence could turn disadvantage into opportunity. A single lesson emerged from the breakdown. Resilience alone wasn't enough. She needed a plan, a calculated, strategic approach to rise above public scrutiny and systemic bias. The quiet brilliance she had nurtured in darkness would have to confront the glare of reality, and not just survive, it would have to thrive. Mini cliffhanger. Broken, scrutinized, and underestimated, Maya now faced a choice: retreat into the shadows or pivot, strategize, and turn the world's underestimation into her advantage. Which path would she take? The night after the public humiliation, Maya sat alone in her small apartment, the city lights casting muted reflections through the window. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to pause, not out of defeat, but to listen, to observe, to reflect. It was in that stillness that clarity emerged. She realized she had been playing the world's game by its rules, reactive, cautious, defensive, but her strength had never been in compliance. It had been in preparation, in insight, in the quiet cultivation of her intelligence. She didn't need permission to shine. She needed strategy to create a stage where her brilliance could no longer be ignored. Here's what that moment teaches us. The turning point often comes not from external validation, but from internal realignment. When you face systemic obstacles, the answer isn't to shrink, it's to evolve. Her mentor, a retired educator who had taught her in school and still offered guidance through weekly calls, reminded her of an essential principle. Power, Maya, is not about being seen first. It's about being ready when the world finally looks. With that, a new plan formed. She would leverage the very systems that had underestimated her: her access to the mansion, her observational intelligence, and her knowledge from years of disciplined study. Every setback, every unfair critique, became data. Every small humiliation became insight. She would design a strategy that turned invisibility into leverage. She didn't announce it. She didn't broadcast it. She simply acted. She revisited her notes with renewed purpose, devised methods to optimize her work, and identified opportunities to demonstrate her brilliance in ways that couldn't be ignored. Each step was calculated, deliberate, and strategic, a silent climb toward a payoff the world hadn't anticipated. And in her quiet resolve, the first spark of transformation ignited. She didn't just want to succeed for herself. She wanted to reshape the expectations around her, to prove that systemic obstacles could be navigated, and that intelligence nurtured in the shadows could flourish in the light. Mini cliffhanger. With a new plan in motion and a spark of strategic brilliance, Maya was ready to act. But would the world allow her hidden power to emerge unchallenged, or would the forces aligned against her intensify as she rose? The following weeks passed like a masterclass in quiet mastery. Maya moved through her tasks with precision, each action deliberate, each observation purposeful. She didn't announce her intentions, nor did she seek recognition. Her work spoke in subtleties, solutions implemented before problems escalated, efficiencies introduced without fanfare, and insights offered only when timing guaranteed impact. She became a shadow strategist, transforming ordinary responsibilities into opportunities for influence. The mansion, once a stage of minor humiliations and systemic challenges, became her laboratory. She observed the staff, noted patterns in the billionaire's routines, and refined her approach to communication and problem-solving. Every interaction was a calculated move in a game the world hadn't realized she was playing. Here's what that moment teaches us. Progress is often invisible at first. Silent preparation allows mastery to compound. True strategic power doesn't seek applause. It builds momentum, accumulating leverage that becomes unstoppable once released. The billionaire noticed subtle shifts. Tasks were handled before he asked. Mistakes that once occurred ceased to appear. The efficiency and thoughtfulness of the operations began to speak louder than any announcement could. Slowly, respect began to replace doubt, though no one could yet articulate why. Maya, for her part, remained disciplined. She did not allow small victories to inflate her ego. She knew that the ultimate test wasn't in quiet wins, but in the moment when the world would finally measure her intelligence, her resilience, and her strategy on its own terms. And as the days progressed, she began to connect dots that others ignored. She anticipated needs before they were expressed. She innovated within constraints. Her brilliance, cultivated in darkness, was now becoming impossible to overlook, yet the payoff was still intentionally delayed. Mini cliffhanger. Every silent win brought Maya closer to her ultimate reversal. But as her strategy unfolded, unseen forces were beginning to stir. Colleagues, competitors, and systemic pressures that had underestimated her were starting to notice, setting the stage for a public reckoning. The moment arrived almost without warning. A high-profile event at the mansion, an industry gala filled with influential figures, journalists, and potential partners, became the stage for Maya's long-prepared strategy. The same people who had doubted her, dismissed her, or overlooked her, were now unwitting witnesses to her brilliance. She moved through the event not as a cleaner, but as a strategist in control. Subtle interventions prevented mistakes that could have embarrassed the billionaire and his team. She corrected errors gracefully, anticipated crises before they escalated, and guided key interactions behind the scenes. Each action, invisible to most, built momentum toward a singular revelation: the underestimated had been operating the entire time at a level few had imagined. Here's what that moment teaches us. True power often manifests quietly before it demands recognition. The world rewards spectacle, but mastery is built in silence, and when released, it cannot be ignored. Then came the turning point. A critical problem threatened the event, a logistical disaster, one that could have cost millions, and damaged reputations. Maya stepped forward with a solution so precise, so flawlessly executed, that the disaster was avoided entirely. Attendees whispered, amazed by the seamless outcome. The billionaire, watching from a distance, realized that the very person he had seen studying late at night had orchestrated the reversal. She didn't gloat, she didn't seek acknowledgement, yet the room, the system, and the hierarchy all shifted in an instant. Colleagues who had doubted her competence were exposed, not through public humiliation, but through undeniable evidence of their earlier misjudgment. The very biases that sought to keep her invisible were dismantled by her strategic execution and moral clarity. And in that climax, Maya achieved more than victory. She transformed the perception of her environment. She demonstrated that intelligence, resilience, and preparation could not only survive systemic obstacles, but also recalibrate power dynamics. The world had underestimated her, and now it had no choice but to acknowledge her impact. Mini cliffhanger. The reversal was complete, but triumph carries consequences. How would the world respond to someone who has quietly rewritten the rules, and what ripple effects would her actions create beyond that night? The morning after the gala, the mansion was quieter, but the effects of the previous night rippled far beyond its walls. Maya's colleagues who had doubted her competence now faced the uncomfortable truth. Brilliance cannot be confined by assumptions, titles, or appearances. Their skepticism had not been malicious in most cases, merely a product of systemic bias, yet the lesson was undeniable. The billionaire, for his part, called Maya into his private office. There was no fanfare, no excessive praise, only a calm acknowledgement of what he had observed. "You didn't just save tonight," he said. "You changed how we approach everything." She realized then that her victory wasn't about proving someone wrong. It was about demonstrating that preparation, resilience, and strategic thinking can shift outcomes, influence systems, and inspire others. Here's what that moment teaches us. True impact doesn't just elevate the individual, it reshapes the environment. When someone quietly cultivates excellence and acts with integrity, the ripple effects transform expectations, challenge biases, and inspire others to reconsider their own potential. For Maya, the fallout was both subtle and profound. Colleagues began to seek her guidance, offering opportunities for collaboration. The systemic obstacles that once felt insurmountable became a series of challenges she could now navigate with authority. And yet she remained grounded, knowing that power is most effective when paired with responsibility and foresight. The redemption wasn't only her own. The people around her were forced to confront their assumptions, their biases, and their reluctance to recognize talent where it was least expected. Even the billionaire acknowledged a personal shift. The quiet brilliance of those often overlooked can hold the key to transformation. And for Maya, the lesson was clear. Victory is not measured by applause or recognition alone, but by the change it sparks in systems, in people, and in the perception of what is possible. Mini cliffhanger. The stage was set for a legacy, a demonstration that hidden talent, nurtured in the shadows, and revealed with strategic brilliance, could rewrite expectations, not just for Maya, but for everyone watching. Months later, Maya walked through the same mansion, now greeted with respect and acknowledgement, rather than doubt. Her journey had transformed more than her own life. It had quietly reshaped the environment around her, opening doors for those who had been underestimated or overlooked. The billionaire, once merely a silent observer of her late-night studies, had become a mentor in subtle ways, recognizing that true leadership is not about control but about nurturing talent, even when it appears in unexpected forms. Maya's colleagues, once skeptical, now sought insight from her perspective, learning firsthand that brilliance is not measured by uniform, title, or status, but by preparation, strategic thinking, and courage. Here's what that moment teaches us. Legacy is built through consistent action, quiet mastery, and moral courage. When you align your abilities with integrity and strategic insight, you don't just succeed, you transform the systems that once sought to contain you. Maya's story challenges each of us to ask, where have we underestimated potential? In ourselves, in others, or in the people society expects to remain invisible? Where can we cultivate hidden brilliance, prepare for the unseen, and act with both courage and intelligence to change outcomes? She didn't just win a single night or a single challenge, she created a ripple effect, inspiring those around her to rethink assumptions, confront biases, and embrace possibility. And in doing so, she left a legacy far larger than any immediate recognition, a blueprint for rising above systemic obstacles, navigating adversity, and reshaping expectations with dignity and strategy. Final call to action. The lesson is clear. Cultivate your intelligence quietly, act with courage, deliberately, and transform the world patiently. Like Maya, you can turn obstacles into opportunities, invisibility into influence, and preparation into lasting impact. If this story resonated with your values, take action today. Like, comment, and subscribe, and carry forward the message. Brilliance thrives when nurtured, perseverance prevails, when strategic and true transformation begins with a single, courageous step.